Hello, hello. Welcome to the Takedown Breakdown, the aftermath
Oh man.
of one of the, I guess some people call it the silliest fights in a while, but it was a real fight. We're talking about Jake Paul and Tyron Woodley today, and the result was not what some people expected, maybe what other people expected. We're gonna give our takes and do what we do. Let's break down the fight. Jesus, let
Before,
me know what you think.
so before we break down the fight, I want to say this before I get on my rant. I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised.
Mm.
Tyron Woodley went into that fight. He looked very determined. He looked like he rejuvenated himself. He looked like he was ready to come back and show everyone that he's not washed and show everyone that he still has it in the tank. He still has a lot in the tank, and he did show moments of that. But what bothers me is, what's riding on this. Your legacy is riding on this. You know that you're the better fighter. You know that you are the better athlete, just in general, and you let the whole opportunity slip away. You had a chance to show the whole world, look, just because I'm 39 years old, just because I lost my last 4 fights, doesn't mean that I'm out. Doesn't mean that I can't fight still. Doesn't mean that I can't finish people. You had one highlight. That's what he's leaning on. To say that he won the fight is a real big disrespect to Jake Paul. Anybody who thinks that Woodley won that fight, you are out of your fucking mind, because he did not win. Tyron Woodley did not win. And it's such a fucking disgrace that someone of that caliber, of a legend in the UFC, a legend in mixed martial arts, couldn't even put away who we thought would, who is just honestly just a boxer. He's not a high top tier boxer. Jake Paul is a boxer with 3 years of experience. Tyron Woodley, typical Tyron Woodley shit. I've been a Tyron Woodley fan since God knows when, since maybe his Strike Force days. And as he got older, he just didn't show that he could, change things. We've seen all of these promos before when he came back to fight Gilbert Burns, and he was doing all this Muay Thai stuff and on the path to success and back to the road of becoming a champion. But what has he done differently for the last 5 fights? Nothing, literally nothing. He throws one punch. He is just thinking, oh man, I could just do this one punch and that's it. You can't do that in boxing. You have to fight. You have to set up combinations. You have to use your jab. And that's one thing that he's never done when he fought in the UFC, was use his jab. He didn't do anything differently. He showed that he was still the same Tyron Woodley that cannot get it done. And it fucking bothers me, because it's like, you had that opportunity to show that, yo, you're still here. You're still the man. You can make it happen. You can knock this guy out. You only had one highlight out of the whole fucking fight. Out of that whole fight. This, and that's what you have to show for it. That's legit what you have to show for it. And it bothers me because, yo, you just let the opportunity slip when you had the whole match in your hands right there. I have a lot more to say, and I really want to go on a rant, but I'm going to leave it at that. It's just annoying, man. It's just really annoying, because it's like, yo, he was in great shape. He took that fight serious. He took the training for that fight serious.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I don't think that he slacked. I don't think that he was there for a payday. I don't think any of that stuff. He just didn't show up. He had moments where he showed up. He had moments where he wanted to be like, all right, I'm going to take over. But come on, dude, for you to lose the way you did, like, for the fact that some judge scored the fight to Tyron Woodley, that person needs to get removed out of that athletic state commission. Because how the fuck do you give the fight to Tyron Woodley? That was easily Jake Paul's fight. And then you saw that he was getting tired, and then he caught a second win close to the end because he's like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna do whatever I want. I'm just gonna, and he was the one setting up the punches. He was the one throwing the combos, the beginner, I guess, if you will, for the lack of a better word. And it's like, come on, man, like you had it in the bag, and it's like everything that people say about you, you're proving them right. You prove Dana White right. You prove all of your haters right. You prove all the Jake fans right. The only thing that you didn't prove them right on is that you didn't get KO'd. But you legit went the distance with this, man. You let that guy go the distance. Let's say you won. Let's say that if you won the cards, let's say you won, I guess, whatever, split decision, 2 judges vote for you. And now you give him more clout because now you're saying, now Jake Paul, if he lost, he would have said, you know, he was a tough competitor. You know, it's upsetting that I lost, but I lasted 8 rounds with one of the scariest welterweights in the world.
That's what his brother said about Floyd.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like you got people like Brendan Schaub dick riding them because like, oh, well, it's a win. It's a win. And it's like, yo, these guys legit possess like decent skills, half-ass skills. And what bothers me is it's like these mixed martial arts artists, these mixed martial arts fighters are just biting. They're biting at the bait. Because they're like, oh, I could beat Jake Paul. I could beat Jake Paul. So he's picking his fights and he's doing it strategically. Because think about all that shit that he spoke about Ben Askren. Everybody and their mother's like, yo, put him in a fight with a real striker. Put him in a fight with a real striker. Who bit the bait? Who took the bait? Tyron Woodley took the bait. And what happened? He showed that he's the same Tyron Woodley that can't get the fucking job done. That went 5 rounds with Damian Maia. Went 5 rounds with Stephen Thompson. When he had opportunities to finish that fight. Like, what do you have to show for your legacy now? Honestly, you may or may not disagree, but that tarnished his legacy to lose in the way that he lost. And it's so annoying and it fucking infuriates me because it's like, yo, you had that one shot to shut this motherfucker up and you didn't. You are a disappointment to just combat sports because of that subpar performance. That's all the end of my rant.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Takedown Breakdown. We're done.
No, but you know, it's crazy because everybody is saying the same thing that Woodley was. What was he doing? He was taking pictures, you know. And I gotta give props to Jake because he picked someone. And when this fight was announced, these two can attest to this. I literally said Jake is going to win. He did exactly every single thing that I analyzed that he would do. So why Tyron Woodley? What really happened during the fight? Why did Jake Paul pick Tyron Woodley? You would look at Tyron Woodley and say, oh, man, this guy's scary. You could see his highlights and say, oh, man, this guy got knockout power. And you see his build, his physique, his aggression, quote unquote. Jake Paul picked Tyron Woodley because he's a fighter that looks the part but doesn't throw punches. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. That's it. He looks the part, does not throw punches. Jake knew that even if Tyron did walk him down, which is exactly what he did, he wasn't going to throw punches. Why? Because Tyron is more concerned about getting hurt than he is hurting someone. Mm-hmm. He didn't go in there to win. He went in there to try his best to not lose and not get embarrassed.
Yep.
So that's why he was like taking photos, as people say. You have him on the ropes, throw a fucking jab. You have him hurt, follow it up with a combination. Oh, he throws an overhand. If he missed, hunt the guy, hunt him. I didn't see anything impressive from either guy. And you know what pisses me off is we were waiting to see how Jake would look after the second round because he's never been out of the second round. Well, we saw that. And honestly, I was not impressed. So there's massive holes that he needs to fix. One, he has a cardio issue. Now we know that. Why? Because he's loading up his punches to try and be a knockout striker, and he's moving around a lot because Woodley had him on the back foot the whole time. But the thing that I caught the most from that is he relies on his jab a lot. It's not that good of a jab. And he starts leaning in with his head as soon as he's gassed a little bit. So his technique just goes out the fucking window. Any volume striker that will put pressure on him can beat this guy. I didn't think that Tommy Fury would be able to beat him until I finished watching the fight. And then I sit down and I think, you know what? I actually think Tommy Fury would be a great fight for Jake, not because Jake would win the fight, but because it would be a real test for him. But I think Tommy Fury beats him. Tommy is a volume striker. He feints well. It's not necessarily that he hits hard because he couldn't put the guy that he fought away, but he knows how to use his jab. He's long, he's big, he looks the part. I think Tommy Fury would beat Jake, honestly, at this point.
Yeah.
I think Nate Diaz beats him because he has an iron chin and he has cardio to match, and it will not be pretty, but Nate will just slap him the whole time. He'll just be throwing whatever to hit Jake, and that will exhaust him. And I think he wins a decision. But I was not impressed at all.
All right, so I know Phil has stuff to say, but
no, go ahead.
I remember when we first spoke about it, I had said Jake is gonna win, and Phil disagreed with me.
Yeah.
Until the boxing guy, Jodis, started making the same points that I made. I knew coming into that fight when we first spoke about it, I said Jake is gonna beat Jake is gonna beat Woodley. Why? Jake has fundamental boxing. When you're training the same thing for 3 years straight versus someone else that you have to be multifaceted, it's completely different. The striking in boxing versus the striking in MMA is completely different. You set up feints for takedowns. You set up feints for kicks, head kicks, whatever the case is. We know that Jake Paul has a lot of holes in his game. But again, Jake Paul boxed. That's what Jake Paul did. He boxed. He didn't come into a war. It wasn't a barn burner. He came in and boxed. And he showed that. That's why he won. He is a boxer. He boxes. His other fights, yes. He's just a knockout artist. But you know why he knocks people out? It's because people run to him. Those inexperienced fighters, they run to him with their hands down. Because if you look at the Nate Robinson fight, Nate Robinson was landing a little bit, but he kept running to him, which is why Jake Paul is like, all right, I'm going to take a step back. As I'm taking a step back, I'm going to wind up on my punches, and I'm going to hurt you. And that's exactly what we saw that day. So I wanted to believe that Tyron Woodley would win. And the way he came in, how focused he was. You guys saw how focused he was. Like, he wasn't fazed with things that Jake Paul was saying. The only thing was the disrespect to his mom. And I don't agree with it. Like, that was some hoe shit. You don't ever disrespect someone's mom. If it's between two men, it's between two men. You don't bring anybody else in. And his team is fucking corny for that. Jay Leon Love is a fucking cornball who needs to shut the fuck up already, because it's either put up or shut up, and he's not fighting. So shut the hell up. But nonetheless, props to Woodley for getting in there, and still putting in as much effort as possible. But nonetheless, I tip my hat to Jake Paul because he went in there and won.
I mean, again, so what people that don't train or don't fight understand, and this is for all the casuals that thought that he won the fight because he had one moment. The distance in MMA and in boxing, two very different things. You are a lot further in MMA than you are in boxing. In boxing, you always want to stay in boxing range. However, since you're only worried about one thing, when you're in boxing range, you're either the person that's going second or the person that's first and third. Tyron was never first and third. He was always trying to counter, or he was always trying to just set something up. But he had him on the ropes in range all the time. The entire fight, he was in range. Every single moment of that fight, if Tyron threw something, it would have hit Jake. He should have invested more in the body. He should have just thrown more punches in general. And another thing that pissed me off is, I understand that Jake hits hard. I get that. But if you could sit down and bite down on your mouthpiece and trade punches with Vicente Luque in 4-ounce fucking gloves, you're going to tell me you can't bite down on your mouthpiece and slug it out a little bit with freaking kid. Like, what the hell? That's enough for me. I'm just upset.
Oh man, Phil.
You, me? I get to. Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
go.
This is great. I love that. So I wanted to address something that Jesus said first. The idea that this is a legacy fight for Tyron Woodley is complete nonsense. It's not a legacy fight. His legacy is not tarnished over this in any way. He is still verified. He is still one of the great UFC welterweight champions that has ever stepped foot in a cage. However, I think as an MMA fan, you are a little bit more emotional and upset, and rightly so, because you felt as if Tyron represented the MMA community, as I think we all did. And I think that that's very fair to fall into that trap when, if you look at his entire career, he's never really been that guy, right? Even as the UFC champion, you can argue that this is the biggest fight that he's ever been in. So from that standpoint, you're right that this might be the most relevant loss of his career, but it's not a career-defining moment. And I think that he was there for the right reasons. I think he did have every intention of going in there and saying that he was going to win that fight and try to put some of the naysayers to rest. I want to address a couple of other things. What Jowdy's has been saying for weeks already, for probably months, is completely correct. In terms of Tyron's ability to box, or really just strike in general. But I wanted to take that a step further, and obviously, as Jowdy's alluded to, he picks his opponents, Jake, brilliantly, absolutely brilliantly. He picked a guy that looked the part, as you said, that is gun-shy and never really had an MO of being first or third, which you said. But I wanted to elaborate on that, okay? The UFC, if you go to their website, I don't put a lot of stock in statistics when it comes to MMA, and I'll tell you why. The judges don't have those numbers, right? Like, significant strikes landed or total strikes landed. Neither did they last night in boxing, right? The eye test matters. We watch fights. We understand objectively when we see violence, when we see good violence, when we see precise technique, right? Go to the UFC's website, and I want you to look up the record books. And I'm going to read you a couple of these that I found interesting, okay? Tyron Woodley is a 5-time UFC champion in the welterweight division, which has historically been one of the most competitive and deep and high, highly touted divisions in the world across mixed martial arts.
It's a tough division to be in.
Here's what jumps out at me. Tyron Woodley, for all of that hoopla, 5-time champion, is not in the top 10 in any significant striking category, or forget striking, offensive category. He's a wrestler who's not in top 10 in takedowns, in top control, in takedowns landed. Let's talk about striking. He's not in the top 10 in significant strikes landed, significant strike accuracy. Do you know who is number 1 in significant strikes landed? And it's not even that close. It's George St. Pierre. Significant strike accuracy. Kamaru Usman is 5. He's nowhere to be found on this list. So my point is this. Let's go to fight time. He's up there in fight time, in total fight time. He has the only significant statistic that when it comes to striking in his entire career that is even eye-opening is he has 10 knockdowns in the cage. 10. He's got 10 knockdowns, which is up there in the top 5 in the sport's history in that weight class. He's got 7 knockouts for his career. Okay? This is not a human being that is constantly looking to finish fights. Yeah. Now, here's why I can understand why Woodley thought he won. Because from an MMA perspective, we talked about this before. The numbers, throw them out the window. We don't get credit in this sport for, stuffing 11 out of 11 takedowns, right? I look at moments within a fight. I look at the feel, the energy, the vibe of a fight, and wow, that guy's trying to finish the fight. That guy inflicted the most damage. He had the big moment. So I understand why he thought he won. But this is boxing. This is boxing. You got outboxed for 8 rounds. You lost easily 6 of those 8 rounds. 6, I'll be generous. And even if I gave you a 3rd round, the idea that a judge, a human being who is paid by an athletic commission to judge fights and gave Tyron Woodley 5 rounds is an embarrassment. And it's a black eye on boxing. And it's a black eye on combat sports. It's embarrassing. And this affects guys' livelihoods. Let me ask you a question. Did anybody think that watching the Serrano-Mercado fight last night, that Mercado had anything to be embarrassed about? That woman got beat by an incredible boxer and a girl who was just a step ahead. But let me ask you a question. If a judge scored that fight for Mercado, what would that have done to Serrano's career? Who's trying to be up there with the Clarissa Shields of the world, who's trying to make a name for herself as one of the greatest females to ever step foot in a ring. That is so fucking pathetic, and it makes me so angry. Now, the last point I wanted to make, we've talked about the numbers. We've talked about the things that, Tyron did and didn't do, or Jake did and didn't do. And listen, my hat's off to Jake. He's a marketing wizard, okay? That's all good for him, and despite how I feel about him, he deserves to make all the money in the world. And I'm happy that they had that payday. I'm happy that they had that experience. Now, Tyron Woodley could be summed up to this. After the fight, when he was doing his press conference, and they talked to him about his thoughts and what happened, and what he was going in there, the game plan, this, that, and the next thing, he said, I even hit him with a couple of great shots to the body. In typical Tyron fashion, though, why did you stop? Why did you stop? You had... I think, don't quote me on this. I remember the stat. It said at one point, I don't remember what round, it said at one point Jake had landed 22 body shots to Tyron's 6. What that tells me is that the only guy who got hurt to the body, by the way, was Jake fucking Paul. So those 6 shots that he landed must have A, tired him out, and B, hurt him. So if you had him hurt and you had him within striking distance, how many times did we see him on the ropes? How many times? He was right there.
The roles were reversed. Because typically Tyron is the person that's he has his back.
He walked him down, he stalked him, and that's all fine and good. He was within range. I saw no ability, zero ability to cut an angle, to throw a double jab, to cut off the ring. I saw nothing from Tyron Woodley, and I had Ariel Helwani telling me that was a great performance.
Typically in fighting, well, it's insulting. You always want to take the middle, right? Whether it's a ring or a cage, because once you have that advantage, now you can start setting up opportunities. Okay, double jab, cross, jab.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying? And what bothers me is just like, dude, you did nothing. You legit did nothing. You punched him, you knocked him down, and then you just started fucking taunting.
Wait, but and I will say this. And what Jay just did is correct. The whole thing with the fit. All right. The feel of the fight, any true fan of combat sports would tell you the feel of the fight, the momentum swung with that knockdown, right?
Yeah.
That, by the way, was a knockdown. That should have been a 10-8. That does not change the outcome, but I'm just saying should have been a 10-8 round, number one. Number two.
Those ropes were very elastic.
They were. Now, that should have been a knockdown. That should have been a knockdown, and it absolutely changed the feel of the fight. You saw the eyes change, the mentality, the body language change in Tyron. We haven't seen fight in Tyron in years. But here's the problem. He misconstrued that feeling, that emotion, that raw energy that he finally felt something in there with precision and timing and accuracy. He landed 32% of his strikes. The idea that you can't even fake it until you make it as a professional mixed martial artist who's dedicated 20 plus years of his life to this sport, to being in gyms, to sparring, to learning how to strike, to learning how to box, to learning how to kick, to learning how to defend takedowns, to learning how to shoot a double. How can you not figure out the right times to make it look like you're winning the fight?
Can't teach an old dog new tricks.
You didn't know when to tie up. You didn't know when to throw the double jab, to cut the angle. Awful.
All of that stuff.
Embarrassing.
Right? All of that stuff is cool. He could have cut the angle. He could have done all of that stuff. I'm going to tell you the real biggest mistake that Tyron made. And I don't think we could watch a bunch of analyst videos. I don't think anybody will bring this up.
I know what you're going to say.
What?
No, go ahead. I don't want to take it. Go ahead.
His hand position.
Oh, no.
He's
not what I thought.
Open like this. He's open like this. Right? You got to understand.
He didn't do peekaboo. That's for sure. We talked about that.
I literally said the only way that Tyron wins is if he learns how to develop a good boxing shell.
Yep.
And does the peekaboo style and goes in and rips him to the body.
Yep.
In MMA.
Which he's capable of doing, by the way. Yeah. He's got lethal body shots.
In MMA, you're mostly like this, right? Your hands are open. There's open space. Why? Because you're worried about parrying a kick. You're worried about stuffing a takedown.
That's why it comes down. He had an MMA stance when he fought.
Yes, exactly.
The first shot he threw of the fight looked awkward.
Part of it is his coaches not teaching him how to put a shell, but most of it is Tyron not even willing to do that.
He doesn't listen.
If he had a shell, if he had a proper shell, Jake's jabs and Jake's right hands, they would have landed, but they wouldn't have hurt him. You get what I'm saying? Canelo does this beautifully. He's not great when it comes to footwork, but that man has a solid guard. Like it's here on your temples, elbows tight. That guard is super solid. You hit him and his gloves don't budge because they're glued to his head. When Jake threw a jab, he was slapping himself in the face. And every time he tried to parry, and he parried his movements were way too exaggerated. You cannot be in a boxing match with open stance. It's either your hands are going to be down and you're going to rely on head movement and do that style, or you're going to actually be glued here and be able to protect yourself. You can't be in the middle and expect for shots not to get through. Oh my God! If Jake could have been money all night just throwing 1-2s from long, because every single one of those would have gotten through. Why? Because he didn't have a fucking shell, and he couldn't slip to the outside and come over.
Look at Floyd,
bro. He's
look at Floyd
right here.
Yep.
Right here. This hand is glued to his fucking head.
Not that I expect him to be Floyd. I'm just saying. I'm making the point that to your point, you can't. It's not an MMA fight. And by the way. No, I was just gonna say, like, in the grand scheme of things, when we think about scoring fights and we think, because we're an MMA show, okay? We mostly watch the UFC, some Bellator, some PFL, some right? That's what we watch.
Is about moments.
MMA is about moments,
numbers,
and I would have scored it for Tyron in an MMA fight because he had the moment, he had the knockdown. And by the way, if that was an MMA fight, he would have jumped on him, ground and pound, and that fight would have been over, guaranteed.
Yeah, easily.
But this is boxing, so I think he has to get out of that mindset. And I'm surprised that as a veteran of any combat sport, he couldn't figure out how to do that. He didn't know when to tie the guy up. He didn't know how to close the distance and use his jab. I'm fucking shocked. I'm like, dude, you're the king of throwing one strike. How about making a jab, dude? Then when you throw that jab, how about throw the right that you love so much?
And then when
I'm not a boxer and I know this.
And when you clinch, at least try to put some power in those body shots.
Oh.
And I think he tried to. I really think he tried to. The one thing that got me fired up, I'm like, yes, like this guy's about to fucking turn up, is when Paul, I think he hit him with a hook. He fucking pounded his chest and he's like, let's go. And I'm like, yo, he's about to fuck him up. He's about to take him out. Idea, and that was the other thing I was going to address with Jowdy. The idea that he hurt Tyron at all in that fight is ridiculous. He wasn't hurt. He wasn't hurt at all. He was not hurt. First of all, and his point. No. His point about look at my face too. I'm just as pretty as when I came. When I went in as I came out. He's right. The most damaging shots, the crisper shots, almost all of them came from Tyron. The better combinations and mixing it up and going head, body, head, in and out, that came from Jake. Overall, neither of them were anything to write home about. But if you're talking about strictly boxing, Jake looked like the better boxer. If you're talking about who looked crisper 100%. In terms of delivering damaging shots, it was Tyron.
Tyron's punches were a lot tighter. The quality of his punches were way better. He did a lot more damaging shots. but he didn't fucking throw anything.
He didn't.
can't-
He
you
didn't.
can't
And that's what I'm saying.
score-
Even
you
sometimes
can't
the judges.
score for him
Yes.
boxing is about numbers.
Yes.
Ever since Muhammad Ali figured out, I could win a round if I take a minute and a half off and then just pepper him for the rest of the fight.
Correct.
Floyd
Took a minute off all the time.
Floyd
Let me-
always takes the first minute off of every fucking round. It's not how you start the round, it's how you finish it.
Yep.
And Tyron didn't compute it. I just want to know what the fuck he was thinking while he was in there. Like, was he thinking, "Oh, this kid is way too dangerous for me to get in the pocket"?
That's what I'm saying. He's not afraid. He's not afraid of Jake Paul, right? So then, what was the MO? What was the game plan? That's what I want to know. I want to have his coach. I want to have his coach sit in front of us and interview and be like, "Hey, I'm just curious, what was the game plan?" Because if the idea is don't stay in the pocket with this kid, didn't you just admit that Jake is a real fighter?
The game plan.
I just think
I can fight in spots, but he didn't have enough spots, and he didn't pick his spots
because he's inactive.
That was his game plan.
You already know how I feel about coaches and teams and all that stuff. So, I mean,
it's so debilitating watching him box.
Pedro,
it's so frustrating.
So Pedro Diaz actually trains people like Paige Van Zandt, Tyron Woodley, the guy we saw yesterday, Baranchik, who got fucking pieced up by Montel Love.
Yeah. He looked good, by the way.
I think his fighters are just okay. You know, I don't know too much about Mundo Boxing, but what I saw yesterday and just seeing people like, I guess, what's her name? Paige Van Zandt, like, it's hard really for people to transition from boxing if you don't necessarily have a boxing background. And it's vice versa. It's hard to transition to both. Like, the only thing that we saw, like one shade of Tyron Woodley that made me happy was that overhand right.
Or the fact that he looked like he wanted to be there at certain times in the fight, but he took his foot off the gas pedal constantly after he hurt him. He constantly has this idea of like just backing up. I don't get it. And you see that like with guys nowadays, like especially in MMA, where they are almost too what's the word, like gung-ho about like, oh god, I have him hurt, I gotta do something, and they rush in and they get clipped or whatever. We've seen it happen. He has none of that in him. He has like, oh, I hurt you? That's interesting. Tell me more about that. What are you doing? What are you doing? But I'm sorry, go ahead.
I've never seen a fighter with as little killer instinct as Tyron Woodley.
So I want to take a second because we don't necessarily have to make this like a 2-hour episode or anything. You know, what happened last night happened. I wanted to actually just take a second to give Jake some credit because, listen, if it's me, I'm not getting in there with Tyron Woodley. Okay, like you know what I'm saying? Like that takes a
boxing match. Okay, I'll get into it.
Well, yeah, because you box. I mean, like I'll do a jiu-jitsu competition with Jake Paul, but I'm not boxing Jake Paul. So my point is this: I want to take a second to give him some credit because as much as we like to shit on him because he's the he's the villain. He's the villain that everyone loves to hate and wants to see him get knocked out and this, that, and the next thing. His day will come. But I will say this. There is not a dumb brain cell in that kid, either of them, Logan or Jake. I find them, especially Logan, to be thoughtful, to be conscious and aware of their moment and their situation and where they fall within the landscape. And even though we know that people are tuning into Jake, because he's saying he's the A side. He's everyone tunes in to see me. Yeah, they tune in to see you, not for your skills, but they want to see you get your block knocked off. And that's
like Colby Covington.
But that's more than enough to sell fights. And I will say this: his walkout, his clothing choice, like walking out with the Cleveland stuff on. I find him to be polarizing and a fucking genius with marketing. And I respect that. And I respect the fact that he took a right hand from Tyron Woodley. The kid has a chin. Yeah. The kid has a chin. If he started boxing, let's say when he was, if he started boxing when he was a little kid, if he started when he was 8, he was 10, he was 12, and you're talking, this kid has some skills. I'll give him that. But I wasn't overly impressed. He doesn't beat a single professional boxer in that entire division.
I agree.
Those guys are fucking huge. He's fighting at 190. Those guys are massive.
Absolutely.
Like, they're not little guys. Canelo, I think he fought once at 190. but those guys are really, really big, which is why.
Correct.
My other thing is these guys, everybody that fights them, they need to take a moment and realize they are letting themselves be at a disadvantage because you're meeting him 3 weight classes above where you're supposed to, where you usually fight.
Yeah.
If I was Tyron, and I mean, of course, he has leverage over a lot of these guys, but Tyron should have made him make 185 or 180.
Did you guys get the feeling? Because I want to talk about briefly like what's next, but did you get the feeling after the
that
fight?
He might not have fight again?
Yeah, that like Jake doesn't seem to really want to do this anymore. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying that he won't fight again, but he just seemed like a little weird.
So do you think he checked beat MMA champ and go the distance off his bucket list? And
yeah, because I agreed with Tyron when he said it that it seems like a boxing a bucket list thing for him. I really did. I don't know what's next. I will say this: there's a couple of names, and the Fury fight is interesting to me because I think that the talent level would at least be, and the size obviously would at least be pretty even. The other interesting thing, you know what I would love to see? I don't know why this is not being talked about more, and I know that they both have fights, but I just want to throw this out there. I think Anderson Silva would destroy Jake Paul.
Oh yeah,
and you know who else? Vitor Belfort. That's who I want to see. I would love to see Vitor after.
I got chills just now.
After he tangles with Oscar De La Hoya, and again, objectively, I don't know how he'll do against Oscar. I'm not really sure what Oscar looks like. I have no barometer to figure out how he's going to look and the condition that he's in. But I know one thing: fucking Vitor Belfort is in shape, and that guy can crack.
Is that juice? Juice?
It's that TRT.
That TRT.
And so is Anderson Silva.
So who does he do if he does decide to do this again? What is he? Where does he go? Who can he handpick?
Bro, another.
He's not getting a UFC guy. Dana will never get
another. Listen, you know what bothers me about this is what Jody said. Oh, Nate Diaz will beat him. Why are we talking about more mixed martial artists to fight Jake Paul?
Yes.
Give
me a boxer.
Boxer,
yes.
Give him a fucking boxer. And this is why I say Brendan Schaub is one of the biggest dick riders in the fighting community.
But he's right. You
I
can't
understand.
give him.
But you have to.
You can't.
This is why I don't like. This is why people like Brendan Schaub really boil my blood. He's like, well, Canelo fought a bunch of nobodies in the beginning of his career. This is his 4th fight. And it's like, okay, but he still fought boxers. Fight a boxer who is up to your skill level.
I agree with you 100%, but he can't do this whole MMA. And by the way, do you think and I figured it out over time. Do you realize why Jake is coming out and he's like becoming the poster child for talking about MMA pay and stuff like that? Meanwhile, he's not a mixed martial artist. He has nothing to do with Bellator, nothing to do with UFC. To be able to antagonize MMA guys who can't box to fucking fight him. That's it. Wake up. Hello. So my point is with Jake is going to continue to do this. If he wants to continue boxing, he's going to continue to talk that shit. And Dana, he knows. That's why he's jabbing at Dana. Because he knows, A, he'll never have to be face-to-face with him. And even if he does, who cares? And B, Dana White wouldn't even let GSP, who hasn't fought in, 4 years, who's technically under contract with UFC, his name and likeness, even fight Oscar De La Hoya, who, if Oscar De La Hoya was on the street, laying there in a ditch and had like blood all over him, Dana White would spit and urinate on him. That's how he feels about Oscar De La Hoya. And he
doesn't want to give them.
Honestly,
it'll never happen.
Speaking about Oscar, after seeing Vitor hit pads, Oscar might be in trouble. He doesn't have knockout power at all.
I couldn't. And he's the biggest guy he's ever fought.
Oh my God!
He's going to be in the face the whole time.
Yes.
I really hope
GSP would have been a better fight for him because they're similar in size.
Because who knows how Oscar moves anymore? Like, we know what Oscar was.
It doesn't matter how he moves. If you see all of Oscar's fights, he's never been
he's not a power puncher. No,
he is a volume rabbit. Like, I'm gonna hit you with a bunch of shots that I'm gonna just pepper you. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yes.
You can't knock down a fucking ox that way.
But now, what is the weight distribution? What is the weight difference too? By the way, what are they going to fight at? Does anyone know that?
Oscar's a lot bigger now, so he.
I know that
doesn't want to cut. So I don't know, but they're probably going to fight at 180.
180ish? Yeah, I would think so.
Or 190, like heavy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we just I do want to see what's next for Jake Paul.
I think he's gonna fight again.
Tell me Jake versus Logan.
No,
which would never happen.
That's the build-up. No.
I
It's
think
gonna
Jake
happen.
will fight another YouTuber.
No,
That's
Jake
my theory.
versus Logan.
That's gonna happen.
No. That not anytime soon. I think this is what I think about where this is going. I think KSI, a British YouTuber who kicked all this off, is gonna fight someone. I think he's gonna fight someone like one of the YouTubers that fought just now in the YouTuber card. He's gonna knock him the fuck out because KSI has beat Logan. He's one of the guys that beat Logan, and then Jake and KSI will fight, and that will be a big fight or whatever. And I think that's where it's going because Jake just fought a fighter who was game.
Welcome to the circus that is boxing.
I don't see him picking another fighter. I don't see him fighting Tommy Fury because Tommy will beat him. I really do believe that. I think Tommy will beat him.
What alternate universe are we living in where Jake Paul lost to KSI and went 8 rounds with Floyd Mayweather?
Logan Paul.
I'm sorry, excuse me. That's what I meant with Logan. What happened?
Oh, he just lost.
Logan and KSI are kind of like the same size. Logan and KSI are kind of like the same size. Yeah. Well, welcome to the circus that is boxing. You know already how I feel about boxing.
Yeah, I mean, we're an MMA show and we give boxing a lot of shit, and it's like they don't help themselves.
It's not because, it's only because of the politics within the sport where it bothers
That's
me.
what I'm saying.
For me, I want to see the two guys that are the best guys fight, and you rarely see that in boxing. And the problem is that like UFC has done it very, very differently. And the other issue that I have with boxing is it's not that I hate boxing because I think it's dumb or whatever. I'm not as entertained. B, I don't know anybody in boxing because they don't do a good enough job marketing their stars. And B, and lastly,
they don't fight the best.
But we already talked about that. But lastly, it's like I just think it's a limited form of fighting. I just do.
It's very one-dimensional.
It's one-dimensional, and you could there's more tying up in these professional fights. Like at least the fight last night, they weren't hugging each other the whole fucking time. Yeah. The Amanda Serrano-Mercado fight. The Serrano fight was amazing.
Amazing. It was
a great fight.
And you know what's funny? People feel the way like boxing fanatics feel the same way about MMA. They feel like MMA is. They're like MMA is like it's trash. It's not up to the level of boxing. But
it's a science to them, and I give them all the credit in the world.
Say what you will. But MMA is actually a lot safer than boxing.
Yeah, I would agree.
The death rate, maybe average per year in boxing, there's at least 9 to 10 deaths, where MMA is about 1 or 2.
I don't think anybody's ever died in doing that.
Yeah, it's just weird
that kickboxing,
because it's politics. It's been around longer than MMA. It's politics,
bro. When I see Errol Spence fight Terrence Crawford, when I see Anthony Joshua fight Tyson Fury, when I see fucking Devin Haney fight Teofimo Lopez, when I see Garcia fight Tank Davis, then boxing will have returned.
But why? Let me, because I'm not as big of a boxing, but I'm not as big of a boxing fan. Anything. But I need to ask you, you're the boxing fan in this equation. Why do they never fight? Why? What are they?
Okay. So. Boxing has a lot of sanctioning bodies. They have a lot of belts, right? And there's pros and cons to that because there's more money to go around because there's more belts. But it's a lot harder to become a unified champion. And then if you are a champion, you get a lot more money. So you don't want to risk that money fighting another champion.
Well, that I understand. But is it just money? Because that's why Dana won't make weight classes close together.
It's money and promotions. It's money and promoters. Bob Arum does not want to do business with Al Heyman, and vice versa. Like these guys are. Terrence Crawford had to leave. He had to leave Top Rank because he wants to fight the PBC boxers. Like all of these guys are signed to Fox, and he can't fight them because they just won't do it. Now that's the biggest problem. And then you got people that are greedy about the cuts and stuff like that. Like, why did the Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua fight never happen? People say that it was Anthony Joshua ducking Deontay Wilder. That's cap. Anthony Joshua is 7 times more of a star. He makes 50 times more money. Anthony Joshua gets paid like 25 to 50 million per fucking fight.
Per fight, yeah.
Deontay Wilder made like 10 mil barely fighting Tyson Fury. And his biggest payday ever. to fight Anthony Joshua, he was asking for $50 million. That's 10x what he's ever made. Do you think that's a reasonable jump for someone that is nowhere near the star power for a title unification bout when the other guy has 4 of the 5 belts?
No.
That's not reasonable. So for people saying that Anthony Joshua was ducking Deontay Wilder, it was the other way around. Deontay demanded something, and he wanted it so bad that it was not going to happen.
And he's got a perfect backup plan to fight another time with Tyson to make a bunch of money too.
And on top of that,
he's
so
not
I think
get paid anywhere near
it's the same. And I don't want to take too much time on this. It's kind of like the same thing that John Jones said. If I'm going to take a big risks, if I'm going to take big risks and fight with these monsters, I need to be compensated for it. So I do agree, which is that's bullshit. He should just fight. You know, he's still going to get paid, but it is what it is.
Some guys deserve a payday, though.
But we're not privy to these negotiations.
Not deserve that payday, but
right?
Like John Jones deserves a big fucking payday. But anyways, I think anybody that watched that fight, let us know what you guys think. Remember to like and subscribe. It was a crazy night, and it wasn't what a lot of people expected. But if you really know yourself, you know that Jake is too smart to just pick a random guy.
Yep.
And that's what we saw. You know, and
he set it up perfectly.
So that was our breakdown.
And remember, guys, don't bully. Don't you dare bully people. Through my foundation,
find something you love.
Get involved with boxing.
I'm a bully.
I'm a bully. Don't be what I am.
Yeah.
Go wear 5 chains and get tatted. Go do it, guys.
This is the Takedown Breakdown, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.
Later.